Welcome back to the man cave. So part of this car we're going to do a tune-up, and as part of a tune-up we're going to check the compression on the car. Now with this car I am going to do a relative compression test. So I'm going to take my amp clamp and I'm going to hook it around the positive cable going to the battery, and I'm going to plug it into our picoscope. Now, I'm going to set this up for relative compression. And we're going to go with petrol. Now, when I turn the key, it should jump this line up. I'm going to disconnect the ignition from this car so that it won't start, so that we can just turn the engine and measure the resistance of each cylinder. Oh my. Huh. Well, I guess I just found something else that needs fixed. Okay, so with our amp clamp hooked to the starter, we've turned the car over. You can see that the amperage climbed up to about 375 or 400 amps, somewhere in the 400 range, and then started to drop off. Now, this is the starter getting the whole assembly turning. And then the amperage starts to drop down. Each one of these humps is a cylinder coming up on compression. We're going to get down here where it kind of levels out, and you can see that they're all relatively even. Now, to me, they all look relatively low, but they are relatively even. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the number one spark plug, and I'm going to do an actual compression test on the number one spark plug. Okay, so you can see that we've got 125 pounds of compression on that number one cylinder, which means that that's what we have pretty much everywhere. Since I have the radiator out of this car, I'm going to go ahead and do the valve adjustment right now. And what I'm going to do, since the radiator's out, I can reach this crankshaft pulley really easily, which means that I can turn it with a wrench pretty easily. So I'm going to just pull all of the plug wires and all of the plugs out so that the engine turns easily. If you're just changing plugs and wires, probably the easiest thing to do is to pull one wire at a time and one spark plug at a time. However, since I am doing some other things as well, I'm simply going to pull all the wires back out of the way, pull the spark plugs. Now, when I pull the spark plugs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them on my toolbox so that I know where each spark plug came from. And then I'm going to pull the valve covers off of this engine so that I can adjust the valves. And I'll bring you back in a little while and show you how I'm going to adjust the valves. Now, to get the spark plugs out, we're just going to have to reach down in here and pull the plug wire off. And then we'll take our spark plug wrench and we'll put it down in here, and we'll pull this number one spark plug out. Okay, and then we're going to look at the end of it. Now, this is the number one spark plug, so I'm going to go set it in the number one position here, so that when I start looking at things, I will know exactly what is happening in each cylinder. Now, while I'm doing this, I am also going to pull these wires up out of the way and I'm going to use an ohm meter, and I'm going to check the resistance on these plug wires. And like I said earlier, I think these plug wires have been replaced. They look like they're fairly new. However, I'm going to ohm them out and make sure that they are good. And since I have the ability to turn the engine over, I'm going to adjust the valves right now as well. So we'll bring you back in a little while and I'll show you the valve adjustment. Okay, so we're going to set the gap on these spark plugs. And the specifications call for 45 thousandths. And so we're going to find the 45 on this. And we're going to check the gap right here on the spark plug. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. We're going to check that. That's a little bit tight. So we're going to use this tool right here on the end of our spark plug gapper and pull that back just a little bit. And then we're going to check it again. You can see there that it's got just a little bit of resistance. And anyways, we're going to set all the spark plugs at 45 and then we're going to install them in the car. Okay, so we've got our spark plugs capped and we're going to go ahead and put them in the engine. And some of them are going to be just a little bit difficult to get to. Anyways, we'll install these and then we'll come back and torque them down so that you guys can see the torquing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and torque down the spark plugs. They're torqued at 20 foot-pounds. Okay, there we go. So we'll torque all 8 of the spark plugs and then we'll bring you back and do cap and rotor.